Oh, hey there. In this video, I'm going to shatter all the myths surrounding engine break-in so that you can have a seamless, effortless engine break-in of your own. I'll list out the do's and don'ts around the process so that you understand what the truth is to breaking in an engine. And by the end of this video, I'm going to give you a step-by-step that you can use to break in that motor for yourselves. And I'm going to live and die by this because I'm going to use this exact same method to break in the engine on my Danger Ranger truck. Welcome to Off Camber. In the last episode of the Danger Ranger build, we dropped our remanufactured engine into the truck in order to get it ready for the race on the 17th. Now comes the question I've been asked since I put the engine in the truck. How am I going to break it in? Everybody's got an opinion on this. It's age-old advice handed down from their daddy's grandpappy on how to break an engine in, and this is how we did it back in the day. You want to know what? That was probably great advice for a cast iron block that was made in the 1960s. But for the engine we just put in the Ranger, or any modern engine for that matter, is this really even necessary anymore? And do those same rules still apply? The answer to that question is actually yes and no. However, the reasons we break in an engine and the rules that we use to do it have totally changed. It's not like the need for a break-in has just disappeared, but the whole game has changed. The manufacturing, materials, oils are on a different planet from what we had back in the 60s. In fact, following that old school advice might actually lead to hurting your engine a little bit. So let's get into why this whole procedure got such a huge overhaul and what's the modern playbook for breaking an engine in nowadays. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what you need to do to break in that engine, whether that's a car that you just bought that's fresh off the lot or something that you just threw an engine in. Roller cam, flat tap it, it doesn't matter. We're going to cover it in this video. Make sure you stick around to the end and I'll give you a step-by-step how-to on how to do it. The old rules. So let's take a trip back in time for a minute. It's many, many decades ago. I'm pretty sure dinosaurs were roaming free across the land at this point still. And you just finished building a fresh engine, or maybe someone built it for you, but that doesn't matter. Can you smell it? You know the smell. It's an awesome mix of assembly lube, fresh oil, and fresh paint. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, everybody you know pops out of the woodwork, and they've all got some opinion on what you need to do for the first few starts of this engine to maintain the long life and high performance of it. First up was the oil. It was some special non-detergent break-in oil. The whole point of it was to use something that was just thick enough to keep the parts from welding themselves together, but not so slippery that it would keep them from welding themselves into each other. You were told that dump that oil almost immediately, sometimes even after the first start, just to flush out all the little engine shavings. Then came the driving orders. Whoa, 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 no high RPMs, take it easy, young man. No wide open throttle, and definitely don't run it lean. You had to nurse it through these gentle heat cycles, bringing the temperature up, letting it cool, bringing it up, slowly increasing RPM over time. See, back then, engine parts weren't mated with as much precision as they are today. The tolerances were looser. The piston rings literally had to grind themselves against the rough cylinder walls in order to get a good seal. If you put too much pressure or heat on them too soon, you could destroy the parts before they even had a chance to mate up. And for the technology they had at the time, this was in fact the correct way to do things. And it was key to making an engine last. So what is the why of change? If what they did back then was so right, why is it different today? And it's not just one thing. It's a complete revolution in how we make stuff. What's happening during break-in is still the same core principles. We're trying to get the piston rings to seat against the cylinder walls to create that seal for combustion. And that seal is everything. It's how we make power. It's how we keep oil out of the combustion chamber. It's how we keep fuel out of the oil. And it's how we pull heat out of the piston. What's changed is how we achieve that seal. The biggest leap is in manufacturing. Computers and CNC machines cut parts with the precision that was basically science fiction back in the day. Those tolerances, or the acceptable wiggle room inside of an engine, have become incredibly small. It's why you can get 0-10 weight oil. These things are just way more precise from a manufacturing standpoint nowadays. And it's why OEMs will sell you a brand new car that has synthetic oil in it from day one. One of the main things is a cylinder wall on a new engine uses a process that's called plateau honing. Instead of a rough surface that the rings have to wear down, think of plateau honing as creating a surface that's already super smooth, but has little tiny microscopic valleys to hold oil in. Those microscopic highs and lows are the cross-hatching that you see in a cylinder wall when you get that fresh block back. The break-in process nowadays is just about that final, tiny step of polishing the surface so that you get that perfect seal. And it's not some heavy-duty grinding operation like it was before. The rings nowadays are totally different too. In the beginning, we started out with just cast iron rings. Then we moved along to ductile iron, moly-faced or chrome-faced rings. Then we move into the modern rings from like the LS and the LT era. Well, those modern rings are mated from a high-strength coated steel that are a lot tougher and have a lot less friction in them. They use coatings like a plasma moly, gas nitride, or a special group of coatings called PVDs. PVD stands for physical vapor disposition. Science. Don't ask me. I just read it in a book somewhere. But the crazy thing is that they have different coatings of rings for different applications that you're going to use. Like a drag race vehicle is going to use a different ring than a road race vehicle. It's going to use a different ring than a street vehicle. It's insane how the technology has progressed. And finally, one of the biggest changes is in engine oil. This stuff has gone from a slippery coating that keeps things from sticking together to basically a science experiment, packed with detergents, friction modifiers, and anti-wear additives. It's insane how far oil has progressed. And again, it's another reason why new cars come straight from the factory with these synthetic oils in them. So what do you do with an engine like the one that's in our Ranger when the goal is changed from gentle wear-in to proper pressures? You need to properly break the engine in to create enough cylinder pressures to push those piston rings out against the wall, make sure everything gets a seal, but you want to do it without creating a ton of heat or a ton of stress on the engine. This isn't about babying the engine anymore until those cylinders grind their way into where they're supposed to be. It's about applying varied load and speed into those cylinder walls in a very controlled manner. Usually on a race car, you're going to do this on the dyno because you can add load to the dyno, even on the engine dynos. Or if you don't have a dyno, you got to do it on a specific break-in session on the track, which is kind of what we're going to do. So here's the modern playbook about what we're going to do to the Ranger's engine and what you should probably do for yours. This is new cars included. These are the do's and don'ts. Okay, so arguably the most important part of breaking in an engine is varying the speed and load. Whether you're on the dyno or you're out there on the track or you're even on the roads, you need to do what's called a controlled sweep, which means that you bring it up through the RPM range, you hold it there for a few seconds, and then you let the engine drag it back down. Now, what's bringing it up into the mid-range? I'd say 4,500. We're not going to floor it, but we're also not babying it. So you can give it a little bit of the beans, just don't give it all the beans. The constant change in cylinder pressure is what makes those rings seat so nicely. The next one is let the engine warm up fully. That doesn't mean let it set in your driveway and get up to temperature. That means take it out on the road, get the engine warm, get the oil warm, get the coolant warmed up. Everything comes up to temperature that it's going to operate at normally on a daily basis. Metal grows when it gets hot, so you want it to get to that size when you're doing the break-in so that everything seats the right way. It's how everything's going to find its happy place. Then next, we're going to use moderate loads systematically. What that means is I'm going to make the engine work a little bit. On an engine dyno with a new builder, they probably have a preset program to help do this. On the track, how I'm going to do it, it's going to mean that I'm going to run it through a couple of smooth laps, slowly increasing throttle with moderate throttle pressures, and slowly but slowly increase that and create more and more work for the engine, all while allowing it to come back down. And as we do this, we're going to continue to get more and more aggressive with it. I'm going to do this the first couple of test sessions that we're out there. You got to think of it as being brisk with the engine, not brutal. Okay, so we want to get those RPMs up, but we don't want to be bouncing it off the rev limiter. And if you have an engine builder, follow their instructions. If you're buying oil specifically to break it in, you can go to stuff like Summit's website. Holley has some information. Driven, the motor oil we're going to be using to break in the engine, has those instructions on their site. Most modern places have a set of instructions for you to follow. The one thing you need to make sure of is if you have a flat tappet cam or do you have a roller cam set up. Okay, let's start with the don'ts. And this is arguably the worst one of them all. Do not get on the highway and cruise the thing at a constant speed. Idling for a long time or cruising at a constant RPM is the enemy of a good engine break-in. It doesn't create the dynamic pressure changes that the piston rings need to seal, and it will in fact cause what's called a very thin seal. Next up is don't redline the engine. You need to give it RPM. You need to give it about 3/4 of the beans, but you absolutely do not need to be banging this thing off the chip the first time out. High RPMs where you're banging the thing off the chip, while it sounds cool, is going to create a ton of heat and excess pressures before the parts even get a chance to marry each other. There'll be plenty of time for the glory runs later where you're banging the thing off the rev limiter as you enter the corner. On the Danger Ranger, for instance, what I'm going to do is the first couple of test sessions that I run, I'm going to bring the thing up to about 4,000 RPM and let the engine bring it back down. I'm going to try to use the brakes as minimally as possible, which at 4,000 RPM, I shouldn't have to use them at all, but I'm going to give it about 3/4 throttle. As I start getting it in, as I start getting heat on that engine and everything else, I'm going to start giving it a little bit more throttle. Another really important one is do not lug the engine. Keep it in the appropriate gear for the speed. And this is a big one. Don't have it in a high gear at a low speed and then hit the throttle, because when you do that, it creates an enormous amount of stress on the rods, the pistons, bearings, everything else. On the dyno or on the track, even on the street, this can be as bad as over revving the engine. Next up is don't go straight to race conditions. Don't start it up, get a little bit of heat on it and be like, we're going to send it. Let the engine and the fluids go through several heat cycles first before you start mashing the throttle, because surviving the chaos of a full race is different than just matting it once or twice. All right, so lastly, let's debunk some of these lingering myths. Because so much has changed over the years with the manufacturing and the oils and everything else, there's still a lot of myths out there that are just floating around, old folklore, all sorts of stuff. Let's debunk some of the most common ones. Engines are fully broken in by the manufacturer. Bullshit. Sorry, I coughed. But that is a big, big negatron on that one. They are not broken in at the manufacturer. Matter of fact, I think leasing laws are the thing that prevent that from happening. Sure, did they run it on a dyno? Absolutely. The engine builder ran it on a dyno. The manufacturer does a quick run on dyno stuff when they build them. But that is for doing leak down tests. It's making sure that nothing leaks, making sure all the proper pressures are there, making sure the motor runs the way it should. They are not breaking in the rings. They are running this thing for minimal amount of time. Then they're throwing it onto the assembly line to get it into a car. That's called a quality control check, not a break-in. And the proof is in the oil. You can do this with a brand new car that has only been driven from the assembly line to the back of the shipping truck that it went on. If you change the oil after about 100, 150 miles, the amount of metal particles in the oil is going to be much, much greater. The oil from any new engine is always going to be full of metals. And that's all the ring material and the high spots in the cylinder walls getting broken in. The real piston ring seating process is happening with you right now, whether you built that engine or you're breaking it in a brand new car. Myth number 2, you should drive it like you stole it to break it in. This is bad advice. This is risky. The logic behind it is to get a fast, high RPM, hot seal on those rings. The problem is with modern metals and modern rings and modern engine design, what you're going to do is you're going to put hot spots in the cylinder walls that are not going to seal properly. It's going to lead to permanent damage that really kind of rears its head and probably an oil consumption issue. So all those cars out there are like, oh, they're a little thirsty. They like to drink a little bit of oil. Chances are the owner did not break that engine in properly because they didn't read the owner's manual. No one does anymore. Remember, moderate and varied pressure is the secret, not brute force. Myth number 3, you have to change the oil after the first heat cycle. Okay, this one isn't a myth. This is an actual good piece of advice, and it needs to be done. For a race engine, this is a non-negotiable rule. I am going to run mine just enough to get those rings seated, and then I am changing the filter, and I am changing the oil, and I'm going to cut the filter open, and I'm going to look for debris in there. The first oil and filter change is all about getting those metal particles out. So now, with all of the myths dispelled, let's get to the thing I promised you in the beginning, the engine break-in process. So let's just add one step right at the beginning for flat tappet cams. If you are going to run a flat tappet cam, you need to break the cam into the engine. What that means is that after we determine that we have fuel and spark, we're going to turn the engine on and we're going to bring it up to 2,500 to 3,000 RPMs. We are going to run it for about 30 minutes at that RPM. Then we're going to allow the engine to spin down. We're going to turn it off. Went the wrong way. I turned it back on. We're going to turn it off and we're going to let the engine cool. And then we're going to drain the oil, change the filter. This is going to break the cam and the lifters in. If you have a flat tappet cam, you did that first procedure. If you have a roller cam, you skip it and go right to what we're going to talk about now. First, we're going to start it. We're going to let it get warmed up just a little bit. Not much. We're going to pull it out. We're going to drive it down the road and we're going to bring it up to 50 miles an hour. And we're going to hold it there for a few seconds and then we're going to allow it to drop back down. We're going to keep doing that over and over and over again. As long as it's safe. This is where it's good to go out and find a backcountry road. You guys that are all out in Los Angeles and stuff, I'm sorry you're going to have to go find somewhere to do it or get a dyno. But we're going to run it up to about 50 miles an hour with about 2/3 throttle. We're going to hold it there for 5 to 10 seconds. And then we're going to let off that throttle and we're going to allow it to decelerate. Then we're going to bring it back up, hold it, decelerate. We're going to do that 20, 30 minutes. and we're going to allow that engine to break itself in, and we're going to allow it to get all that heat into the engine that we want. Remember, we want coolant temps up, we want engine temps up, and we want those metal temps to get hot. Now, why are we taking it out on the street, you ask? Because we need that load to break everything in. You can't put load on it while sitting in the driveway. Well, you could, but you'd have to hold the brake down, and then you'd be changing the transmission. So how much of this do you actually need to do? 50 to 100 miles, believe it or not, is the sweet spot. It's not 1,000 miles like they told you all those times before. It's 50 to 100 miles. So at about 100 miles, the engine is going to be done shedding most of its metal. Should we do another oil change at that 100-mile mark? Absolutely, we should. We need to get that metal out of the oil, and we get fresh oil in it, and then we're going to go ahead and let it go to 500 miles. And then we'll change the oil again. The one thing you never want to do is follow these 10,000-mile recommendations for oil. I'm just never going to believe that. I'm sorry. But after about that 500-mile mark, you should be good to run synthetic oil if that's what your car wants. Well, so there you have it. A modern way to break in an engine is not about babying it anymore. It's less of a rough grinding process and more about a conditioning procedure that you're going to use to get that quality seal. Modern manufacturing has given us more powerful and more reliable engines, but they need a more methodical approach to breaking them in. And you just don't need 1,000 miles of babying the engine anymore. By varying the RPM load, using moderate throttle pressures, and staying away from the extremes, you're giving your engine the best chance at a long life and a good performance envelope. And for me, I'm not just protecting a piece of metal. I'm setting myself up for a strong performance in the race and hopefully a victory lap. If this guide helped you out at all and you like what you see, make sure to hammer that subscribe button and smash that like button. And maybe leave a comment or two below. Make sure to stick around and check out our other videos where we're actually getting our hands dirty doing this stuff. Thanks for watching. I'm glad you came. Hope you enjoyed your time here, and I'll see you next time on Off Camera.